think of the proposed changes?
This is something that I know survivors have been asking for a really long time. I am happy that the government has finally come out with some piece of legislation based on Justice Arbour and Justice Fish's findings. I've just received the legislation, so I want to take time to go through it. I want to talk to organizations, key stakeholders about this legislation. I know that there are some changes that I think I would like to see that really speak to the transparency piece that all survivors have called for, that Justice Arbour herself has called for, but I hope that we can work together in our committee when we get that legislation before committee to make the necessary changes together.
Can you elaborate on that transparency piece?
So I had also, I've presented legislation that is very similar to that. I did that hoping that it would happen a bit quicker on the government side, but I also at the same time introduced Bill C-363, which talked actually about making the Ombudsman for National Defence an independent entity that would report directly to Parliament, because those survivors need that independence, somebody to go to, fully independent of the government, fully independent of the chain of command. So I believe that this legislation does a bit of that. They're trying to address the issues within chain of command, but it's still this new position, this general provo, or marshal provo general, that reports directly to the minister, and that doesn't necessarily address everything that my bill would have done.
What about stripping the military's jurisdiction to investigate and prosecute sexual offences? That's, if this passes, that would happen for cases allegedly that took place in Canada, not outside of Canada. Is that enough?
So the minister, he's fully aware. I know he's fully aware of that issue. Like I said, this is one step. It's an important step. It doesn't cover all of the issues that we've seen. It certainly doesn't also address a lot of the people who have been caught in the middle between the public justice system, the civilian justice system, and the military justice system. And it doesn't go back in time either. So it's not perfect, but I do believe it's a first step. Any benefits or any improvements that we can make to this are really important, and I'll try and put those forward in committee. And I do desperately want to hear from those stakeholders to see what they have to contribute, because this is about survivors. We have to make it about what they want and make it the best legislation for what they need.
How could it have better addressed those people in the middle that you described?
Well, again, I think that that's important for us to hear from those groups to see if we can make those changes. They are the experts. They are the ones that need to bring that forward. And like I said, I've just seen this legislation, so I really want to hear from them and do that due diligence of hearing from the people that this legislation needs to benefit.
Do you have any concerns with how long it has taken since the government accepted Madam Arbour's interim recommendation to remove these cases from military jurisdiction until today, and the number of CAF members who've come forward with allegations, like you say, caught in the middle there?
I absolutely have concerns. It's why I introduced the legislation that I had as quickly as I could, both pieces of the legislation that I had. But it's not even just the Arbour recommendations or the Fish recommendations. Let's talk about Deschamps. Let's talk about the Auditor General. Let's talk about several committees from the status of women who came forward with recommendation after recommendation for, gosh, more than 8 years now. So this is long overdue. I would like us to move with this as quickly as we can. And I know that the minister wants to do that as well, so we just have to do that due diligence, make sure that work counts, and get the answers in that legislation that survivors need.
The government isn't committing to additional resources for Crown prosecutors on the civilian side or civilian police as part of this. Yeah. What do you think of that? Do you think that should have been part of this?
I know that there is a significant lack of resources there. I've certainly tried to address that with the minister. That is for him to discuss with his counterpart in Justice, in the Attorney General's office. And I would like to hope that the government will consider that and potentially bring forward more resources for us to see the kind of justice that survivors need.
Does it seem like a gap in what's been proposed today? Like this major change, but not the money or the people to prosecute or investigate?
Yes, it does seem like a major gap, and I will be pushing on the government to look at that as well.
How would you just sum up your key issue with what you've seen so far?
My concern, again, is that independence side of things. When the General Vance issue came about, we saw yet again a horrific gap in terms of where the military was at, where our own government officials were at, and an unwillingness to support survivors coming forward. That independence will be a key push that I will make for this legislation. I will not let that go. Putting forward my own legislation was a key point of that. This is just about also moving forward. So in any way that we can do that in collaboration with survivors, in collaboration with stakeholders, I think that we need to do that. Thank you.
We're talking about the confidence vote today, and what exactly are the Conservatives trying to accomplish here when you know already that they...
To let the people decide what kind of country do they want, whether they'll continue with the carbon tax.
Sir, do you have any concerns about Jenni Byrne's staff running a federal lobbying firm out of her office and redirecting between it?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Do you have any... Why not? You cover many ethics concerns on committee.
Leader's position on that. You don't need to hear it from me.
What are you expecting from the non-confidence vote today? And if you don't mind just coming...
No, I'm happy to say I'll be voting in support of the motion because I don't believe the government should continue, and I expect other parties will see what they come up with today. But I will tell you, in British Columbia, they do not want to see a carbon tax increase of 23%.
Mr. Albas, I'm wondering if you have any concerns about the possibility of conflict of interest for staff working in Jenni Byrne's lobbying firm setting up a federal firm to lobby federally.
So I have a personal rule. I don't talk about anything I don't know a lot about, so I don't know anything about that.
Sorry, so there was no direction from Mr. Poilievre's office when he became leader that whether or not you should take lobbying meetings with his top advisors' staff?
I have no recollection of any of that. So I take very few meetings, and it's usually to do with healthcare and cancer research.
And I just want to ask you a bit more about the carbon tax and the vote today. I mean, what's the strategy here when you know that the NDP are going to support the Liberals anyways?
Well, Jagmeet Singh has an option, and I'm sure his caucus are probably encouraging him to put some space between him and the Prime Minister. But look, if Jagmeet Singh and Mr. Blanchet want to support Justin Trudeau through thick and thin, that's up to the two of them, and then their MPs can go back to their constituents and say why they support on April 1st a 23% hike of the carbon tax.
When will your party's environment plan be released?
Again, I don't talk about things I don't know about. I currently don't sit on the shadow cabinet, so I encourage you to talk to Gerard Detel.
And just to clarify, was there any ethical directions given to you when Pierre Poilievre became leader about what was and wasn't a conflict of interest with what meetings you took with people connected to his top advisor?
We are all told to obey the ethics commissioner and to make sure that we do check up on the lobby commissioner website to make sure that all meetings that are purported to that we've taken have been taken properly. But that's just good governance. That's to make sure as members that we meet all of our duties and obligations under those different acts.
And does it raise
and
any more
I do have to get to question
you?
period.
You've got 10 more minutes. Does it raise any questions for you, though, that staff in her office are lobbying federally?
So I would suggest that we have a Conflict of Interest Act. We have a lobbying commissioner that sets very vigorous rules, and I expect everyone to follow those rules. I'm sure Mr. Poilievre would be the first person to say that, but I don't know enough about the specifics of what you're talking about to give you an answer about a specific case.
Thanks for stopping.
Non-confidence vote that's going to be happening later. What do you think the Conservatives are trying to accomplish here?
Chaos. The Conservatives are only interested in chaos. They don't believe in progress. They clearly don't believe in climate change. Andrew Scheer has said openly that he thinks Canada should be allowed to increase our emissions, which flies contrary to the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Accord, and every party's commitment in the last election in 2021 was to fight climate change and lower our emissions. Everybody had a plan to. The Conservatives ran on a commitment to price carbon with Aaron O'Toole. But since then, the Conservatives have walked back that promise, gone back to their 2019 platform on the environment, which is basically that climate change doesn't exist or they don't care about it. And this non-confidence vote is a joke. Just like everything that Pierre Poilievre has said and done since he became the leader, it's not serious, it's irresponsible, it's reckless, and it's not going to achieve a thing except waste a lot of time in the House of Commons. And that's problematic for me because there's a lot of challenges that Canadians are facing, from affordability and a lack of available housing. The weather's been crazy this year, and we're looking toward a summer which is likely to have more wildfires, more floods, and more challenges that Canadians are going to face. And instead of talking about unaffordable groceries and a lack of housing supply, what we can do to improve our healthcare system or support for newcomers, because of Pierre Poilievre, we're wasting time in the House of Commons in the middle of multiple crises that really do require our attention, which includes the climate crisis.
When you bring up affordability, though, a number of Canadians are saying that that is the number one priority for them over climate change right now, especially when they see the rising cost of, let's say, gas, for instance, and a number of premiers want to get rid of the carbon tax. I mean, is there maybe a disconnect here between your government and, maybe a strategy that is working for the Conservatives, and that's why they're trying to put this forward?
Well, I think that by repeating axe the tax for 3 years, they have definitely gotten the attention of Canadians, and they've actually misled a lot of Canadians into thinking that inflation is a result of pricing carbon, when no economist in Canada will stand up and say, yeah, actually the leading cause of inflation in Canada is your climate change policy. It's just not true, it's dishonest, and it's disingenuous of the Conservatives to continue to lean in on that strategy. But I will say that, with help of provinces that have clearly demonstrated that they're not interested in lowering emissions either. I won't say that about every premier, though, because many premiers are proud of the fact that their provinces have lowered emissions. I saw Premier King from PEI saying, PEI is lowering our emissions. We should be proud of our work. And he should be proud of his work, but he should also acknowledge that some of those emissions reductions are thanks to carbon pricing.
Does it concern you that Canadians are listening to this axe the tax mantra and not what your government is trying to put forward?
I understand why. Things cost too much. It's too expensive to live in Canada, so people want an easy scapegoat. But pricing carbon and a price on pollution and trying to fight climate change is not the cause of that inflation. It's just simply not true, and it's too easy. It's we're not just going to switch off the affordability crisis or switch off climate change with some bumper sticker slogan that the Conservatives keep peddling. It requires consistent focus. It requires consultations with experts. It requires listening to actually what the food banks are saying about solutions to the long lineups that Canadians are seeing. Pierre Poilievre will say there's long lineups at food banks, but then he doesn't listen to what the food banks say in terms of how to reduce those lineups and make sure that we address the affordability challenges that Canadians face. None of them are saying you should axe the tax. They're actually saying you should invest in social programs. You should invest in guaranteed livable income strategies like the Canada Child Benefit. You should increase seniors' benefits like the Guaranteed Income program, which help Canadians and assist with their affordability challenges. I still haven't found one economist who's on the record saying, yeah, carbon pricing, that's what's driving inflation, because it's simply not.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
What was your takeaway from the story this morning?
I mean, I think it's deeply concerning that someone who is working for the Conservatives, who has access to MPs on a regular basis, is lobbying and then trying to hide the fact that she's doing that, especially when Canadians are paying such high prices at the grocery store, while people like Galen Weston are making record profits, and whose backs the Conservatives have. It's clearly the rich CEOs, not everyday Canadians.
Just to clarify, though, she's not lobbying, right? Her staff are lobbying federally under a different firm. Why isn't that good enough for you?
I think clearly that she is in charge of people who are lobbying. She's working for a lobbyist firm and trying to hide it from Canadians. You don't create a shell company unless you think you're doing something wrong and you don't want people to find out.
Okay, thanks so much.
And Ms. Collins, could I just ask you about the non-confidence vote and why the NDP want to support the Liberals in this?
You know, what we've seen from the Conservatives is that they have absolutely no climate plan. They also have no plan to support Canadians as they are struggling with the cost of living. You know what's driving up the cost of groceries? Corporate greed, the climate crisis. We have had a multi-year drought in British Columbia. Wildfire season has started in February in Alberta. Farmers are being impacted. Canadians are impacted. The cost of living crisis demands a response, and unfortunately, we haven't seen that from the Liberals or the Conservatives.
So why are you supporting the Liberals then if you haven't seen a response for them?
You know, we are going to keep pushing the Liberals to support Canadians, whether it's with dental care, pharmacare, with the services that people depend on, ensuring that they get support. You know, what we've seen from the Conservatives is when they look out at the housing crisis, they're going to support rich developers and wealthy investors who are making tons of profits. When we see the Liberals, you know, they have to be pushed to do the right thing. We're going to keep pushing them, but Canadians want a government that is looking out for everyday Canadians, not rich CEOs.
Does it concern you that the axe the tax strategy seems to be working in the polls right now?
I think, you know, we've seen the Conservatives go from province to province with slogans and, you know, really spreading misinformation. In my home province of BC, the federal carbon tax doesn't apply. It was a Conservative-leaning Premier, Gordon Campbell, who put in carbon pricing. Pierre Poilievre has gone to Quebec with the same kinds of rhetoric, the same kind of misinformation. They have a cap-and-trade system. Canadians do not want more misinformation, more lies. They want a government that will actually put their needs first.
Thank you.
Thanks.